Welcome to Custom Home Builder Solutions, a web-based software, also known as CHS, a standalone accounting suite focused on job costing and profit management for professional home builders.
Hi there, this is Carol King, the developer of Custom Home Builder Solutions, also known as CHS. So, how much time, if you're a regular home builder's office, do you spend trying to track down vendors' information before you give them 1099s, or vendors' information about getting their general liability insurance certificates, and figuring out and tracking whether they've expired? How much time actually do you spend trying to control the trades and suppliers especially? What I'm going to do is start a series of videos about setting up vendors and how you set them up and the details behind it. But before I start, I want to talk about controlling those vendors. First of all, what are vendors in CHS? They are all outside entities, trade contractors, suppliers, overhead suppliers, etc., even your bank for service charges, that provide goods and services. Those are referred to as vendors in CHS. They are entities that you will be paying either by check, by credit card, or by your bank debit card. So let's go to the place where you set up vendors, but first of all, I'm going to talk about controlling vendors before I describe setting up new vendors. And I want to show you why, when you set up a new vendor, you need to take your time and not get in too much of a hurry to fill in the things that are needed for the vendor, because by doing that, you will save a whole bunch of time later. So let's just take a glance. I want to take a glance at one of the vendors. It's called Big Bucks, so I'm doing the B button up here. And I'm going to do the pencil edit icon to look at editing this, or just to look at this guy. First of all, the normal stuff is over here. I'll go over about name, address, this and that. But notice that there's other things that you need to pay attention to as you set up the vendor, because you don't want to have to come back and redo work because you overlooked these things and a whole bunch of records got entered without having the information that you need that could come from this. For one thing, the 1099s you need to set at the default. So if they're a trade contractor, usually they get what's called non-employee compensation 1099. You need to be sure you select it. Be sure you get a W-9 form. I'll show you how to be doing that and controlling them. Pay attention to sometimes the IRS, if they have a business name and you use a social security number here, the name to print on the 1099. You don't want to have to be coming back and filling that in. There's defaults here that will drop in when you're entering bills, making it a lot faster, like what general ledger account number in your chart of accounts, what department, this and that will drop in when you start entering a bill. And please watch the video about that section. There's things about what payment terms they require, which will help as you open to do a new bill. It will help set the due date, whether you withhold retainage from them. Don't overlook that, and especially don't overlook if you need to deal with general liability insurance or workers' comp insurance, that you go ahead and mark that whoever it is that's required, usually subcontractors or trade contractors, you put a required here, get their insurance certificate. I'm going to show you how to request that from them. Put in the expired date. And if you want to have a dynamite general liability audit report, you should get from your insurance carrier how much rate they would charge you if this person was uninsured. And there's different rates for different trades, and usually your insurance agent can give you that. And if you have workers' comp, the same kind of thing, that it's required. And then don't overlook down here that there's 5 other things you can track. You can type whatever you like in here, whatever your state, if you're trying to track the state license or track their city license expiration, or for some reason I'll put contract on here as required. So anything that you check mark here, CHS is going to be very active in showing you when those are expired. And that's what I'm going to mostly focus on. I forgot to save my change there. Close this. Close this. And what I'd like you to see up here is various tools for controlling all of these vendors. I'm going to talk about this before I tell you about setting up vendors and start into the detailed videos about those different sections. So first of all, let me show all the vendors again, since I'd limited them to the B one a minute ago. And the very first thing I'd like to go over in talking about ways to control vendors is vendor expirations. So I'd like to show you a window that really helps you control those vendor expirations and looking for ones that may have expired. So what you'll see here is a list of all vendors, active vendors only. And if you start looking at it, let's look at that big buck that we looked at just a minute ago. We had set up city license contract. We checkmarked general liability insurance was required. We'd also set up a miscellaneous one of state license and workers' comp. Notice the various expiration dates here. This is actually in November of 2020, and so these are red, the ones that have expired. And you need to bear in mind as I do all these videos that I am actually not a home builder's office, so I don't sit updating all of these things and getting stuff in. I'm just demoing software, so I'll do one or two and keep up with those. But you can see that the general liability insurance is not expired because it's in black. And notice some other things that are in red. That's the last paid date, the last date that you paid this vendor. So if you have one that's expired 3/31/2021 and you last paid them in 2020, it's in black because that's all good. We didn't pay them after our insurance certificate expired. So if things are in red over here, you might be concerned about those if they're in our current year. If they're old vendors, last time they were ever paid was 2016, you might not care about that. So I'd like to show you how you can use tools up here. Let's say with general liability insurance, we're concerned about that. And let's say we're concerned about anybody under the last paid of 01/01/2020 to 12/31/2020. And we want to see the ones that were paid after the expiration date. So paid after expire is yes. And down here it says you can type in partial for the expiration type, like their state license, city license, all that stuff. And I know I'm interested in general liability, so I'm just going to type in liab to search for anything that has that in its string. So notice that we ended up with 3 for general liability insurance expirations, and 3 where their last paid date was after their insurance expiration date. And so what I'd like to show you is that you can narrow it down to that, and then you can use a tool over here. Let's do Austin Air, and let's request their general liability insurance certificate from them. Now notice that this says this is a request. It knew which line I clicked that on, so it already filled in. You can expand these boxes. And it's explaining that to the vendor, Austin Air, that they'll get an email, and in the email it will say this: use the reply button, and then use the reply arrow to reply to this comment, and then use the add attachment button to upload your certificate, and then be sure to send it to us. I'm not going to send this right now. If I sent it, this would go out, but I've actually already done one. So what I'm going to do is actually just delete this, but this is exactly what I did just a little earlier today. So I'll delete this, but I could have sent it on to them and they would have received it. So let's see what happens as a result of that. I am going to go over to the Launch tab, which is the screen that opens very first in CHS, and it shows you your latest comments to and from you. So here I've scrolled down to where I sent that request out to Austin Air, requesting their liability insurance certificate, etc. And then I see that I've received a reply from them, and yellow means it came from an outside contact, and that they are saying attached is our general liability certificate. So if I click the paperclip, I can take a look at that and see what it is that they sent us. And I see that they're sending us one that expired on March 21st, 2021. So that's great. And that they have $1 million in liability insurance. But the next thing I wanted to show you is that right here, you can click this Save Attachment as a Vendor Doc. and I'm going to select that it's general liability, and I'm going to store the attached vendor doc. Well, it is noticed that I already had uploaded a general liability certificate, and if I wanted to go look at that one, it will open that vendor setup screen that we saw a while ago where you're putting in name and address and 1099 stuff. And I could click on something there to look at the control docs and look and see that the one that I have uploaded is an expired one. I already know that, so I'll say no, continue the update. And now it asks if I want to open that vendor setup screen just to take a look at everything. And so what I'd like to look at is the vendor documents that are here under General Liability Insurance Certificate. See what it is, and it is the right one, so it's 32121. So I could stay here, close those documents, and put in 0321-2021. And remember, we saw that their liability is actually $1 million on that certificate. I'll save this. So that's one great control that we have on the vendor setup. Let's go back to the vendors list. So we talked about the vendor expirations, but let's take another look at it real quick. You can narrow it down and do the same thing. You can see the, let's go look at Big Buck and see the difference it made on this screen. I mean, not Big Buck. We were talking about Austin Air. Sorry. Now notice all of a sudden that general liability insurance is in black. We have one that's all the way to 2021, and the amount that we paid them for 2020 is good. So if I did the same kind of search again, now we have 2 left, and I'd like to show you something else real quick that has to do with control and dealing with those general liability insurances. So let's go home, let's go to vendor insurance, and let's just play like our policy period was those dates, or we're just checking things out. Usually your policy period is some other dates, but you could have used the same thing. But I'd like to show you general liability audit. There's that ABC Foundation showing that we've had paid things after the expiration date of the general liability. So there's that Austin Air. And there's JT's wallpaper showing up with a red X right here. And you can go ahead and open right here and send a request for a document from this screen also while you're working on that. Same kind of thing, sending that request. So I just wanted to point that out. There'll be a whole other stuff about these general liability audits. Let's go back to the vendor's expirations. Hopefully that gives you a pretty good idea of some controls that you can use. Search for different things, decide what kinds of things you want to request. And this will only show vendors that you marked, again, you check mark that these things were required on their setup screen. I had to pause the video for a minute, and I'm back, and I wanted to show you one last thing on this vendor expirations, because I just searched again for everything that was last paid during the year 2020. And so that's all that's showing up here just because. And if you do the results report up here, you'll get a report of just what you searched for. Notice how it says max of paid date, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to that, etc. You'll get filters that tell you what you searched for. But notice that it says here export to PDF to see certificate attachments. Notice how all these are blank right here because this is an HTML web view that is not showing those until I export them to a PDF. I'm going to open with my own Adobe Acrobat Reader. And look what showed up over here. And notice how my cursor is turning into a little hand. This actually means that this was an old one that was uploaded before we started going out to AWS with our uploads. And that you need to go there. There's a thing that you click and it'll let you get it on uploaded. It's for old customers. Anyway. You'll notice here on our Austin Air, if I hover over it, it's active and it's ready to open that general liability insurance certificate that we uploaded. Now I'm working on my local machine, and so I'm not really out on our server where it got uploaded, so I can't really click that and show you anything, but I promise you that if you click this, it will open this general liability insurance. So that's a pretty cool thing, plus this is a report of everybody you can look at. And from that, you can tell whether you've uploaded anything for them or not for these various things if you'd like to have that report. So that's a pretty cool vendor control deal. Let's close all that and close out. And I'm going to pause for a minute, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to talk about one more control thing that we have, which is called vendor docs. So we're back on the vendors list, and I'm about to show you this button for vendor docs, but I wanted to show you something else back on the home main menu. That when you expand this vendor setup, you'll see something about vendor control docs, which will take you to the same place I'm going to take you from the vendors list. And vendor expirations will take you to a screen that has a button for that vendor expirations that we were looking at just a minute ago. So there's various places all over the place where you can get to these control things. But I'm back on the vendors list now. And let's click this button for vendor docs. Well, first, before I say that, let me just say one more thing. Let's look at the Austin air conditioning. Right here, see this upload icon? It's going to open something you've been seeing that I've been clicking on. There's like 10 things that we have set up for you to attach directly to the vendor. Now there will be other things that can be attached to the vendor when you're uploading a bill from the vendor and this and that, but these are called the control docs for the vendor contract, a W-9 form so you can get their information for their 1099. We were looking at these liability and insurance certificates. This is just an other that when you upload you can name it, and I'll show you that here in just a second. And there's those miscellaneous expirations, and when you click to upload, you'll get a thing to upload the photo, and you'll be able to tag it and do various things, which I'm going to show you. But you could do that right from the list, where you just decide I'm uploading control documents for the vendor right from here. But let's go ahead and go to vendor docs up here. What this is, remember we had 10 things over there, where there's 10 columns here to show you whether you've uploaded stuff for things. And the purpose, and this little upload icon does the very same thing. It opens that very same window, which we'll talk about again in a second. But what you can do is you could search for things that maybe you haven't uploaded a liability certificate. And if you did a search right here, and this is an important thing when you're setting up your vendor, you need to be sure you give it a vendor type in the field where it asks for vendor type, and that's shown in the videos, the very next video actually, about setting up the basics for a vendor. But you need to give it a type so that you can search for things by type. So do that. Don't just go right by that either when you're setting it up. So what if I just do subcontractor, and let's say we just want things paid in the year 2020. And I do a search. You'll see over here that it has subcontractor and last paid date. It has subcontractor on every one of these. So in general, you do liability certificates for subcontractors. So you might start, and these people have been paid, and you might start realizing I haven't uploaded their liability certificate. So you'll notice that there's other things here. If you hover over it, you can see that this was a general liability certificate just by looking at the name of it. And this was vendor info, and this was vendor info. That's quite often where I put the vendor info form that I will show you in the next video. Actually, instead of doing a general liability certificate, I'm going to show you how, if you click this icon, I do have a W-9 for this person that they just sent me, or they handed to me. I scanned it, and so I have it in a folder. So I wanted to show you this uploading real quickly. So if I upload, and I navigate to it's actually Randall Builders where I think I stuck that stuff, and I have some control docs. You can see that I have one that I named Big Buck Redacted. So it's uploading it right now, but the important thing about it, you can see other videos about all of this other stuff here, is that you should name it so that it means something to you. So you might say Big Buck W-9 form. Something like that, because I'll show you why. Let's save this and close. And now you'll notice that it is filled in. If you don't have one uploaded, it'll just have the upload button. If you do, you'll have an open button where you can click to open and see what you uploaded, and it is that W-9. So you can see that you can do it that way. Now, we just talked in this video about sending a request for a document, and you choose which kind of document you're going to request, and you send it off to them, and a comment is made. So you can do that from here. Just send a request and then choose which one of these you're requesting from them. So I won't go over that again. But what I'd like to show you is that for Big Buck Construction, if I click All, I'm going to see everything in the file cabinet that is marked for Big Buck Construction, and the latest thing uploaded will be at the top. But notice how handy it is that I said Big Buck W9 form. If I'm over here looking for things, I can search by that title and type part of a title. And earlier I did a Big Buck vendor info that I uploaded, so I titled it that, so it made sense. Some of these are getting titled by CHS. If you upload a bill, when you're entering a payables bill, everything will show up here, and it will give you a lot of information about what job it was related to and a whole bunch of things. So I could see everything that I've uploaded related to Big Buck here. So that's another. You can get to the file cabinet from the main menu. If I collapse this, you can go to the file cabinet, and you can ask for the contacts like Big Buck or all for certain jobs and certain things like that. Since I was talking about uploading things, I thought I'd point that out. But maybe you can get a general idea for how you can use this. You can also, you don't have to click this upload icon to get that send request for document. You can just do it right there. If you notice things that are missing and you search for various things based on what you need to see, and for their paid date for this year, it's just a big control to show all 10 of them lined out like this, so you can easily see and look at the screen to see things that you wished you had that might be missing. And I think that's all that I needed to say about this. I just wanted you to know about this other vendor control feature. And thanks for watching, and now please watch, if you haven't, watch the setup videos that have more detail about setting up the vendor and filling in all the things that are needed for insurance, for 1099s, for dropping in defaults when you're entering a new bill. And please take your time to set up your vendors, and don't just skip past all that, because if you skip past all that, you'll be spending more time all of the time later trying to go back and fill those in, or you'll spend longer entering a bill because things don't drop in that you set up there. So I just wanted to point out how CHS is all about controlling those vendors and trades, which is one of the biggest jobs that I think any home builder's office has. And thank you for watching.